and what lessons and how can the lessons from prior crises can help us and also countries and leaders to predict the future and also build country resilience.
Thank you very much, Iman, and thank you for the summit for addressing this topic that has to do with how we manage the risks that we face, the nature of the risks that we face in society, cross-border risks, from climate to pandemics, financial stability, geopolitical risks, all of them are cross-border, and therefore what kind of risk management framework we want. And I think there is two big ingredients we need in this risk management framework. The first one is to understand that we have to move from a world where it was just in time to a world where it will be just in case. So we have to be able to map better the risks. We have to be capable of understanding what kind of mitigating factors we need to address those risks, understanding that the risks come also from our interdependence, but that the answer is not to pull away from the interdependence, but to manage the interdependence. I mean, the idea that we're going to go autarkic, the idea that we're going to build walls behind which we will protect ourselves just simply is not efficient. So the answer is better managing those risks that come from interdependence. And I think if you want, the best expression of this is climate change, where there is no wall high enough that will protect us from the emissions that other jurisdictions are responsible for. The only answer is therefore to address emission reduction and extracting the carbon that we have already put in the atmosphere together, which calls for spaces of international cooperation. The second big ingredient, and this is something that we should never forget, risk management frameworks are also about people. It's not just simply about systems. It's also about people. This is what we've seen during the pandemic, and therefore putting people at the center of the risk management framework, making sure we address their concerns, making sure we address their anxieties would be essential to the success of the managing the risks.
Mm-hmm. But Your Excellency, I'm going to stick with you to follow with some ideas. You mentioned climate change as a challenge, and we're facing unprecedented challenges, if we can say, because there is climate change, migration, food crisis, debt crisis, disruptions on supply chains, also many of them. How that reflects for the future and what's going on to be faced on the future challenges, how complex and how can leaders prepare for them?
So I think I would say two things, Iman. First is we have to invest more. Governments need to invest more. Businesses need to invest more in foresight, in anticipating, in bringing the future closer to today, in understanding the big trends that are impacting and that will impact our healthcare systems, the trends that would impact our economies, the trends that will impact our societies or our political systems. So we have to invest more in anticipating the future, in preparing for the future. Now, sometimes these exercises look a little bit like science fiction, but frankly, what we've been going through in the last 4 years are a little bit like science fiction. Who would have told us that the world was going to be brought to a standstill by a virus? And it did happen. So first is to anticipate by investing in foresight. But the second is to be efficient at managing those risks that we will need to be better at identifying. We need to apply systems change. We need to apply systems thinking. And you know, governments, international organizations, and you have a fair amount here, are not built as systems. They are built as verticals. For agriculture, you've got an agricultural ministry, an international organization for agriculture. For finance issues, you've got a finance ministry and an organization that deals with finance. For climate, you've got a climate ministry and an international organization, a few of them that deal with climate. But the world is not organized anymore around thematic issues. It's organized around challenges to be resolved. So how do we weave all these strands towards resolving an issue like climate change, which requires fixing agriculture, dealing with climate finance, dealing with consumers, with standards, with technology, which we haven't spoken about, but it's a big issue. So these two, foresight, more investment in scanning the future, and two, system thinking and system organization.
What do you think, Prof. Manuel? Do you agree? Can we be prepared? How to prepare for the future storms and shocks so we can anticipate them, adapt them, and also be agile towards them?
So, well, thank you very much for the question and for the kind invitation. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you.
I agree with Arancha on this topic. So I think there's a fundamental feature to the world that we inhabit, which is that it's a world that is changing extremely rapidly, exponentially, in fact, and exchanging across the board. I was participating yesterday on a panel on the future of higher education, and it ended up being a panel on artificial intelligence and on ChatGPT, because the landscape of higher education is being disrupted immensely. But I could give you a ton of metrics of exponential change. The way our public debate is structured today is completely different to the way it was structured 20, 30 years ago, before the advance of social media. Fast-changing societies require strategic foresight. They require planning. They require adaptability. They require resilience on the part of both leaders in the public and in the private sectors. A lot of that work can be done from academic institutions. So in the institutions that we lead, we focus very heavily on training individuals that can navigate that environment of change. A second feature of the new international order is not just exponential change and velocity. I would argue is interdependence and and complexity. So we live in highly interdependent societies, highly interdependent. Something that happens in Silicon Valley will affect everybody in this room in the space of weeks.
It's a very connected world.
Extremely interconnected. But at the same time, by the way, that interdependence is coming apart. We also live in a world that is breaking up geopolitically, geoeconomically. So we need to train people and leaders to be both global and to understand that these challenges are truly global, but also to be capable of assessing risks and navigating an environment that is very volatile. If you ask, I don't know how many folks in the room come from the corporate world, but I think we inhabit probably the riskiest environment in regulatory, political, geopolitical terms that we have inhabited since the end of the Cold War. And a final feature of the world, and I want to mention this, I mentioned this at a university yesterday, is fragility. I think we live in growingly fragile societies, very unequal. This is particularly true in Western societies that require for a great dose of empathy and for inclusive leadership. And I think adapting and building a promising future will also be about public service, and it will be about working for others and building just and inclusive societies. So I think those three features, velocity, interdependence, and fragility, are key determinants. And if we want effective leaders in the future, in the public and in the private spaces, we need to have folks that can address these head-on, that can do foresight, that can work in complex environments, interdependent environments, global environments, and risky environments, and also people that have a sense of public service and want to work to build more equitable and just societies. And I think the features of leadership in the future are very much around those themes.
Your Excellency, Prof. Arancha, academically, since Prof. Manuel mentioned it, do studies of agility, leadership, cooperation have a place in the academic system or international policies models?
So I lead a School of International Affairs in the University of Sciences Po in Paris. And the recipe, let's say, that we think is the right recipe is mixing intelligently three ingredients. Knowledge. Of course, you need to understand, you need to know the subject matters, you need to know History, very important. You need to know sociology, very important. You need to know anthropology. If you want technology to work, you might as well learn about anthropology. So knowledge is very important. But beyond knowledge, there is skills. I mean, ChatGPT may give you a great essay with lots of knowledge. But the moment you need to negotiate border delimitation with your neighbor, you have to sit around the table. And you need to be capable of putting yourself in the shoes of the other side. And he needs to understand your red lines. And all of that requires incredible doses of skills. Empathy, ability to dialogue, capacity to negotiate, understanding diversity, those are the skills. And the third ingredient that for us is essential is experience, is experimenting. Not just designing in the abstract, but having sandboxes where you play with those concepts, where you train and try yourself. You see how difficult it is, but you also see how to make it work. So knowledge, skills, and experience. Let's never forget that at the end of the day, a school like the one that Manuel leads or the one that I lead is about preparing the young generations to be the future leaders.
But leadership can be learned?
Of course leadership can be learned. Of course. You learn, and leadership can be practiced. And it's not just about leadership, capital L. We can all be leaders with little l in our different parts of the economy or society or government where we work. So yes, absolutely right. I mean, some people have some skills that make them more suited for leadership in research, for leadership in thinking. Some others are better suited for leadership in communication. But of course, this is something, you know, the first thing I tell the students when they come to Sciences Po is this is not a school for mercenaries. This is a school for leaders who understand that they can change the world in which they are. A small world, medium world, big world, world of business, world of academia, world of government, very important, world of international organizations, very important. But you can change the world.
Prof. Manuel, what needs to be thought and learned for the next generation of leaders?
Yeah.
What to focus on and how to make them like a principled approach and with values as well?
Well, let me say something about leadership, because I think the actual definition of leadership is significant. And if you ask me, the deepest definition of leadership is the willingness to work to address common challenges. So leadership is much more about a state of mind and about a philosophy about life and one's function than about the actual ability to do certain things, right? There's a lot then to effective leadership, but the beginning of leadership is about attitude and about addressing common problems. And we need a lot of that, to be quite frank, and we need people that are committed to addressing these challenges, and to, in particular, if you ask me, to helping those that have been less fortunate and that are facing challenges that they themselves cannot address. In terms of what can be trained, I agree with Arancha's comments. So if you look at one of the effects of technology in society, is it has produced a plummeting of the value of information transfer. This is true not just in the academic space, it's across the business world, for example. So the businesses that lived off information arbitrage, moving information from one place to another, they're all going bust. So if academic institutions, if we think that we're in the business of information transfer, we're going to go out of business, right? Because folks are going to be able to access this in other places. Rather, we're in the business of training people to develop skills and to apply them to better use information that is going to be readily available. So I think the skills piece is central. And when we think about ChatGPT and other tools, they follow this trend. They're simply making information more readily available for folks. So the value add is going to be on the analysis, on the thinking, and on the deployment of these. I also think something else that I think is important, which is about lifelong learning. I think all of us, and this speaks about adaptability as well, many of us are going to go through a very high number of job transitions throughout our careers. We're going to be working in very different environments, so we need to be ready to reskill, readapt, and deploy new knowledge and skills in new environments. And I think this lifelong learning concept is going to be vital. So this front loading of education, people go to university and then they never come back, or they come back once again in their life. I think that's going to be out of business very soon. And I think universities, if we do our job well, we're going to be companions that accompany you throughout your life. And you go back through mentoring and programs, and you have these modular surgical sort of interventions of learning throughout your career to keep you updated. I think that that's key. And a final word, it's also connected to something Arancha was saying, which is developing leaders and training them is also about the people that you sit them with, the convening capacity that you have. So who is brought to the classroom, who their colleagues are, who the faculty is, how they engage with the real world, I think is key, and I think universities can do that. So if we're effective at these things, I think we can make a big contribution to effective leadership moving forward from the academic space. And some of the international affairs topics that we addressed before are in dire need of leadership in the future.
Your Excellency, in this process, what's the role of technology? Because you mentioned before, both of you, ChatGPT and etc. But in general, the lawmakers and policymakers of today, in general, they are ignorant of technology. They don't know what's going on and where it's heading. So is technology implemented in the academic space nowadays for the new or the next generation of leaders? And also, do you believe technology can help the next generation passing through tough times?
So let me, Iman, tell you a bit of a secret. Hope Manuel doesn't mind. Both Manuel and I, in the Instituto de Empresa in Madrid, in Sciences Po in Paris, are working to create a very new space for studying in international affairs, which will be where technology intersects with international affairs. We've been studying international affairs for the analog world, but technology now is a huge ingredient impacting international affairs, from international currencies to cyber security, which is a growing feature of the defense and security debate, to electronic commerce, or rights, individual rights and freedoms in the technological space. So we are building something that is very new, that we hope lots of students around the world and lots of students, hopefully in this country and in this region, will be interested to study, which is how technology intersects with international affairs. Because technology is not just a means, it's not just a tool, it's not just a new way in which we learn or teach. It has to be also a subject that we study, that we understand, in order to be able to take the right risk mitigation strategies, but also develop the proper public policies also.
Yeah. What's your opinion? Just 1 minute and a half.
I'm conscious of the time. Just to add a concept on this. I think it's fair to say we are convinced, I am convinced that technology is going to constitute an entire new domain for foreign policy. So this is not just about digital diplomacy, making better use of Twitter to communicate our policies, not even digitalizing our consular services or using technology to deploy diplomacy. This is a new field where strategic interests and values are decided. It's a little bit like what happened to climate. So if you look at climate diplomacy, it began being understood as a very technical field. So it's just the scientists and people working on climate. It's now, how much is it? I mean, a third of our diplomacy, maybe it's climate diplomacy. We have treaties, we have specialized diplomats working on this. If you look at the effects of technology on society, it is so big. It changes everything. It changes our security. Yes. New weapon systems, outer space, cyber. It changes our economies, the capacity to retain, to attract talent, to innovate. It changes fiscal dynamics, it changes market dynamics, and it changes our values. How we deploy technology, how we use it for surveillance or others, how it intersects with human rights. Boy, if that is not a field of foreign policy, if that is not high politics, I don't know what high politics is. Yeah. So I think the prediction here, and this is why we're working on this, is that you will see this become an entire
Yes.
domain for diplomacy in the coming years.
Thank you very much for being with us. Prof. Manuel Minez, Provost of IE University in Madrid, thank you very much. And also thank you, Your Excellency Arancha Gonzalez Laya, Dean of Paris School of International Affairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.